Okay, so this is the review for the Unit E test. And so the sheet starts off going through some definitions. So just make sure that you understand, not necessarily word for word definition, but just explaining it in your own words what these things are. Here I just have some basic descriptions about what these are. And so you can see that the median is nothing more than the segment from a vertex of a triangle to the midpoint of the opposite side. That midpoint is a crucial feature. Altitude goes from a side, or goes from a vertex of a triangle, and it connects to the opposite side at a right angle, so it's perpendicular to that side. Circumcenter is the intersection of all the perpendicular bisectors. Orthocenter is the intersection of the altitudes. The centroid is the intersection of all the medians. The incenter would be the intersection of all the angle bisectors. Angle bisector is a term that we've looked at previously, being a segment that bisects the angle, cuts in half the angle of one of the angles of a triangle. And then a perpendicular bisector is a line that bisects a segment at a 90-degree angle. So you will need to know all these definitions for your test, so make sure that you understand these. Also here, this is the centroid theorem. So notice with these instructions, at no point does it say midpoint, or at no point does it say median or centroid. So you have to see that B is a midpoint, and this red line goes from the midpoint to the vertex, thus making it a median. And so the median, all three medians inside of a triangle intersect at this point Q, which is the centroid. So what we have, the centroid theorem says that these distances are cut into thirds. So the smaller segment is 1/3 of the entire length, and the larger segment is going to be 2/3. So if we have that BE here is equal to 21, then we know that QE, which is 2/3 of that, must be 14, because 14 is 2/3 of 21, much in the same way that 1/3 of 21 is equal to 7. Now if you look at this, 1/3 is half of 2/3, as is 7 is half of 14. So if we have this larger segment AQ being 8, this smaller segment is going to be 4. So QD is 4. And if we add these together, we get the whole distance 12. You can check this again, seeing that 2/3 of 12 is 8, 1/3 is 4. Likewise, BQ is the smaller part of the median BE, sorry. So if BQ is 3 in this case, QE would be 2 times that, which would be 6. And if we add those together, we get the whole distance BE. So we have 1/3 of BE is 9, and 2/3 is 6. So this is the centroid theorem. You will need to know this, and you need to work through these problems. Likewise, you'll have questions like this. So here, we want to list the sides of triangle PQR in order. So just drawing a quick little picture, doesn't really matter what they look like. We're given that the angles are this. So first thing we need to do is we need to figure out how big each angle is. So if we know that the sum of the angles add up to 180 degrees, we can add up these values and set that equal to 180. So if we have 9x plus 4x minus 2x, that gives us 11x. And then if we have negative 4 minus 16 plus 68, that's going to give us 48. So 11x plus 48 equals 180. If we subtract 48 from both sides, we get that 11x is equal to 132. And then if we divide 132 by 11, we get that x is equal to 12. So if x is equal to 12, then that means that angle P is going to be 104 degrees. Angle Q is going to be 48 degrees minus 16, which is 32 degrees. And then angle R is going to be 68 minus 24, which would be 44 degrees. And so if we add those all up, then we would get 180 degrees. So the smallest angle here is Q. So that means that that's going to open up to the smallest side. So the order of the angles are Q, R, and P. So then Q opens up to the side PR. So that's why PR is the smallest side. Angle R is here, and that's the next smallest angle, and that opens up to PQ. So PQ is going to be the smallest, next smallest side. And then finally P. So P opens up to QR, and so QR is the largest side. And those are the three sides in order from shortest to largest. So make sure that you do understand that in order to get the angles, you have to add them up, set them equal to 180, but then also that the relationship of the angles tells us what the relationship of the sides is. This is the triangle inequality theorem, showing us that if we set up these inequalities, so 5 plus 6 must be greater than 7, 5 plus 7 must be greater than 6, and 6 plus 7 must be greater than 5. Well, if we check all these out, 11 is greater than 7, 12 is greater than 6, 13 is greater than 5. Because these are all true, that means that yes, in fact, this is a triangle. However, for part B, if we try to do 2 plus 7 is greater than 9, we can see that 9 is not greater than 9. So that means that no, this is not a triangle. So you will need to set up the three inequalities to show that they all work. But of course, if you have one inequality that does not work, all you need to do is show that one that doesn't work. All right, next up we have this question. Now, this is asking us to find the centroid of ABC, triangle ABC, given these coordinates. Now, the nice thing about this is that it goes through the steps here, and this is how it would be on your test. So the first part is to find the midpoint of AB. Well, the midpoint of AB is just 0 plus 4 divided by 2, and then 0 plus 0 divided by 2. The sum of the x values divided by 2 plus this, or comma the sum of the y values divided by 2. And so this gives us 4 divided by 2, which is 2, and 0 divided by 2, which is 0. So that is the midpoint there. Next, we want to find the slope between the midpoint, which we just found, and C, which you already know. So slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is 2 and 0 are, that's the midpoint, and then C would be 10 and 6. So this would be negative 8 over negative 6, so that would be 4/3. So, oh, you know what? Nope, sorry. I got my values mixed up there. The y values, so if I do C first, I'll do C first. So 10 and 6 minus 0 minus 2. So this is 10 over 4, which reduces to 5 over 2. So that's the slope there. Then we want to find the equation. Well, we can use point slope form to get that equation. So if we do y minus 0 is equal to 5/2 times x minus 2, this is nice because y minus 0 is just y. And when we distribute in the 5/2, the 2's cancel out, so we just get 5's. So that gives us an equation, and now we start over again, and now it asks to find the midpoint of BC. So BC, B and C is 4, 0 and 6, 10. So we get 4 plus 6 over 2 and then 0 plus 10 over 2. So this gives us 10 divided by 2, which is 5, and then 10 divided by 2, which is also 5. So the midpoint of BC is going to be 5, 5. If we want to find the slope between that midpoint, so 5, 5, and A, it's going to be the difference of the y's, so 5 minus 0, and over 5 minus 0, so that's nice because that's just going to equal 1. So the slope is equal to 1. And now, when I use this formula to find the slope, I can use either point that I want, and so I'll actually use, because it's going through A, which is at 0, 0, that's going to make the work a little bit easier. And so if you notice, everything kind of cancels out nicely, and I'm just left with y is equal to x. So if we want to find the intersection between the two lines, y is equal to x, and y is equal to 5 halves x minus 5, I can set those two equal to each other. So that means that x is equal to 5 halves x minus 5. I can solve this by getting rid of the fraction, multiplying everything by 2. So I get 2x is equal to 5x minus 10, which gives us negative 3x is equal to negative 10, and then finally x is equal to 10 thirds. If we want to find the coordinates of the centroid, that's the x value. Because we know that y is equal to x, the y value is the same. So that means that the coordinates are 10 thirds, comma 10 thirds. Now that's the intersection of those two lines, but what we just found were medians. So that means that the coordinates of the centroid are that very same intersection point, 10 thirds, comma 10 thirds. So make sure that you understand those steps. A lot of the first semester stuff is in there, finding slopes and equations and all that stuff. But you have to understand the vocabulary here. So please make sure that you understand this vocabulary and that you are able to work out the necessary problems that come from them.